one day somebody does something unspeakable to someone else, to someone you hardly knew, and you do something about it because you can.
The story is brought to us from MPR News. The Minneapolis police chief has joined a group of law enforcement leaders decrying President Donald Trump's pardons for all who rioted at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th of 2021. Chief Brian O'Hara published an op-ed in the Minnesota Star Tribune over last weekend, calling Trump's decision a slap in the face to law enforcement who were injured or died as a result of the riot and those officers' families. He told MPR News guest host Emily Bright that the Capitol attack was shocking initially, but that he's further shocked by how it's been publicly normalized. Quote, it wasn't but a few years ago all of us watched on live TV for hours exactly what happened there as police officers were assaulted, says O'Hara. Officers were bear sprayed, pepper sprayed, crushed into doorways, choked, and beaten. Officer Brian Sicknick of New Jersey died after 2 strokes the day after the attack. 4 other officers later died by suicide, he recounted. Quote, so it's really unbelievable to me that, we're in a situation with politics being as extreme as it is, that we have so many people that are just willing to excuse the violence on police officers simply because of their politics, says O'Hara. Now, while campaigning for re-election, Trump billed himself as the law and order candidate and said he'd inject record investment in hiring, retention, and training of law enforcement and increase liability protection for officers. Some, including O'Hara, see his pardons on day one of his second term as hypocritical. He said, quote, it's just crazy to me, and it's even more disturbing to have folks that, for lack of a better term, consider themselves in the pro-police crowd that excuse the pardoning of people who very violently assaulted police officers. It's just unfathomable, he said. When asked if it's the place of a police chief to get political, O'Hara said no, and that he believes police are foundationally independent of politics. He said, however, we are to be held accountable to political authorities, and I think that this is a very dangerous situation where we have so many people thinking that this type of violence can be excused simply because it promotes their political side. Now, the Trump administration mandated a freeze on civil rights litigation, which appears to include the Minneapolis Police Department and the U.S. Department of Justice consent decree. Quote, no matter what happens with the consent decree, the city is committed to this work and to building upon the reforms we've continued to implement in the Minneapolis Police Department. That was a statement from the city. Quote, we will be moving forward with the terms laid out in this agreement, with or without the federal government. That's a statement from the city. Now, O'Hara compared the Minneapolis situation to that of Baltimore police 4 years ago. The department came to an agreement with the Department of Justice and filed it in federal court prior to Trump's first inauguration. Trump's attorney general tried to withdraw entirely from the agreement, but a federal judge in Baltimore decided to enter the consent decree anyway, which is what I would expect would happen here if the same thing played out, said O'Hara. Now, he's yet to hear from lawyers at the Department of Justice or the city. The consent decree is now in the hands of a federal judge. No matter, O'Hara said, he's committed to carrying it out, as many topics in the federal decree overlap those in the state consent decree. Quote, there have been dozens of community meetings over the last year, policies published online for community feedback that are in various stages of approval, both with the independent monitor as well as the State Department of Human Rights. We have a leg up than any other city in this situation, and we are well on our way to implementing a number of these reforms that are already included in the state agreement, said O'Hara. So when you look at it, this police chief, this is kind of how I hear it, is that he said, look, we're going to do, what the Department of Justice wants us to do. The consent decree, we're going to do it. But the gist of this story is that he's not happy. And I hear that there's a lot of law enforcement officers that are not happy that a U.S. president stepped in and pardoned so many convicted felons who committed assault and some serious assault, violent assaults on police officers at the Capitol building. And what gets me is when Trump said he's a pro law and order president, he's going to be a pro law enforcement president. So many cops were shaking his hand and going, he's our man. And then he pardoned all those people from January 6th. And a lot of those same cops went, he was our man. What the hell? you know? Hey, you know how it is. It's good to be the king.